Hello everyone, welcome to your next class. In this one, we're going to spend a little bit more time with strings, specifically how modulos work with strings. We've learned a lot about how modulos work with integers and floats, but now we're going to show you a kind of a trick and technique in Python that allows you to format strings dynamically in a really simple way that with your current knowledge would be very messy and difficult and kind of a pain to do. So we use the modulo operator in order to do this trick. So what you're going to learn today is how to replace and dynamically assign multiple values to a string. So let's say you have some sort of output that you're going to want to print or like save into a text file or something, and you want it to have like the height is blank and the weight is blank all in one piece of text. The blanks you can have replaced with values that you're computing in Python or in your script earlier on. So that's what we're going to use the modulo to do, and we're going to do this kind of faster, easier to do method than what would be otherwise expected if you were to just use this with some more basic skills with string manipulation. So basically, a modulo for a string is you put a modulo at the end of the string and you have a modulo in the text itself, and the modulo replaces with the variable that you put into it. I'll show you the syntax later, but basically use modulo within a piece of within your string, and it'll help you replace that modulo value with some value that you're computing later on. And that's what a modulo for strings is doing. So with that, guys, we're going to move into the syntax, and I'm going to draw out how this is all working, okay? So here we are. So first thing I've done is I've initialized two variables. I've initialized two floats. I call it pval and rval. P-value, R-value. This stuff will... These terms will make a little bit more sense when you start to do your statistics chapters. So I just named these two variables, these two floats, p-value and r-value. I created one string using the traditional way. I wanted to say the p-value is the p-value, the r-value is the r-value, and how you would do that with just your arithmetic operators with strings is something like this, where you'd have to start the string here, and then the p-value is, and then you can add strings together. So you might want a space in there. I could maybe add a space here and remove this part, but I added a space just to illustrate that you might want to like spread everything out. And then I insert the p-value, and then I have to include more. I can even reduce this. I can say the r value is within these quotes here, and just like remove that if I want. But regardless, you see here that you still have to do a lot of like adding pieces together, and it's a little bit messy. You also have to do this dynamic typing where because these are floats, you can't add these things together. So you have to like say, okay, well, you need to turn this float into a string before this thing will work at all. This will error out. But instead, what a modulo does for a for strings is it replaces all the values with what you want. So first thing we've done here is you have one string and you have these two modulo instances. You're going to see this first one has 0.6f and the second one has s. The S means that you should do like dynamic typing and expect it to be a string coming in, okay? And this is saying expect it to be a float, and we gave it parameters saying we want to 6 decimal points float. So even if your float has less or more, it will convert it to that amount on the fly for you. You'll notice that we have, once we've completed the string, we now have this modulo here, and then we have a tuple. And then this tuple contains all of the values for the modulo replacements that we're going to do. So the first one is replacing it with a float with 6 leading zero values, and the r value is a string, and these are both p-value and r-value. If you only had one variable that you were putting into this string, like if this thing didn't exist, you wouldn't need the tuple, and you could just do modulo and the one variable. I'll show you what that looks like. But if you have multiple, it has to be a tuple, and it has to occur after the string. So this is the syntax here. We'll look at this one more time when we go into our code. So when we print this, you can see that like this is a lot more compact, even though there's only there's like variables that you're putting in here. It's still a lot easier to kind of like read and interpret, because you can go, the p-value is okay. I'll read the list later. The R values, I'll read the list later, and oh, okay, it was those two things, and it came from there. So logically, this even is easier to read and makes more sense to as you get more used to this kind of stuff. So with that, let's move into code, and I'll show you how this is all working. Okay, here we are in our code, guys. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to print this and show you how that comes out. Very good. I'm going to remove this because that's a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. We can also do this here and replace this. And that would be like the cleanest way to build this. However, you still have to do a lot of dynamic typing, and like it's actually a lot harder to build out if you're coding it. So let's see what this looks like. It looks like we expected. It replaced those values. It didn't do the 6 leading zeros like we wanted to, but it just printed both of them as strings, okay? And you'll see here that we just used the arithmetic operator in order to do this. We had to use like 3 altogether. With this version though, what we have, and if you haven't seen this yet, when you have a hashtag in front of your code like this, it turns it into a comment. Basically, it won't run. I'm not sure if we've encountered that yet. So if it's hashtag, everything to the right is just like, it's not going to run. So you use that to like block out code sometimes. Anyway, back to this. Let's see what happens when we print this one. Okay, so not only do we have the 6 leading zeros, but we had everything else working just fine. We didn't have the dynamic type. We just put in our p-value is, said, okay, I'm going to give it a variable incoming. The R value is a variable incoming, and this is all the entire string, and then using the modulo after, you then can include your variables. So this is wrapped in a tuple. If we had another number, we can do, this, a string, and we go num2 equals 12. And we can add num2 here, and it'll just like print 12 right there, okay? The last thing I also wanted to show you is if you only had one operator or one wildcard, you don't need a tuple at all. So this is a way to make your format and set up your strings in a way that's a lot easier for outputting data or doing some visualizations. You name it. It's a really important tool that makes Python super nice to use. One last thing before we head out here, guys, that I just forgot to mention is what happens when we don't have this dynamic typing in this string here. Let's just show you what kind of error we get. It must be string, not a float. So as I was saying before, another reason why it's better to use like a modulo is that you don't have to force dynamic typing. It makes your code more efficient, it runs faster, and it's a lot easier to read. So I wanted to at least just demonstrate why that would error out, because you're trying to add a string together and you can't add a string to a float. Remember from our earlier class, you can't add 3 to watermelon. So first you have to convert this into a string for it to go, okay, well, first you met the number 3 to watermelon, and you can add that and then it goes watermelon 3 or something. With that said, guys, now we'll hit up our recap. All right, guys, with that, what did we learn today? We learned how to use modulos with strings and how to do some advanced string formatting. I showed you why it's more efficient to do that, how you can do like dynamic string setups and manipulation. So we've learned kind of like string slicing and some more advanced techniques with string slicing in this lecture. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.